Dr. Fauci said there is no magic drug for coronavirus right now, which you would agree. I guess on this issue,
I think we only disagree a little bit.
Sorry.
I disagree. Maybe and maybe not. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. We're going to know.
Is it possible that your impulse to put a positive spin on things may be giving Americans a false sense of hope?
No, I don't think so.
Misrepresenting the preparedness right now?
No, I don't think so. Look, it may work and it may not work. And I agree with the doctor, what he said. May work, may not work. I feel good about it. That's all it is, just a feeling. I'm a smart guy. I feel good about it. And we're going to see. You're going to see soon enough.
What do you say the Americans who are scared, though? I guess nearly 200 dead, 14,000 who are sick, millions, as you witnessed, who are scared right now. What do you say to Americans who are watching you right now who are scared?
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say. Go ahead. I think it's a very nasty question, and I think it's a very bad signal that you're putting out to the American people. The American people are looking for answers, and they're looking for hope. And you're doing sensationalism, and the same with NBC and Comcast.
So
I don't call it Comcast. I call it Concast. Let me just for whom you work. Let me just say something. That's really bad reporting. And you ought to get back to reporting instead of sensationalism. Let's see if it works. It might and it might not. I happen to feel good about it, but who knows? I've been right a lot. Let's see what happens.
A stunning, grotesque, appalling moment between the president and our colleague Peter Alexander on what should be a basic job requirement for any president addressing the fear of Americans at a time of crisis. Joining Kim Atkins, we have the former Congressman David Jolly and politics editor of the Daily Beast, Sam Stein. Guys, I do not love doing media criticism and media stories. I would much rather be talking right now about the crisis that the country's facing in terms of the coronavirus. But you see Donald Trump there in a week in which he declared himself to be a wartime president, rising to the moment to fight off the invisible enemy. And instead of answering a question, the question that Peter Alexander asked, I'll repeat it in case anybody didn't hear it. What do you say to Americans who are scared, though? Nearly 200 dead, 14,000 who are sick, millions, as you witnessed, who are scared right now. What do you say to Americans who are watching you right now who are scared? The fairest question, the most reasonable question, and the most easily anticipated question that a journalist would ask the president in this moment, and the president chooses to attack Peter Alexander and say that he's a terrible journalist. Later on said he's not a good journalist when it comes to fairness. I'll start with you, Sam Stein. Well, go.
Yeah, I mean, it's not exactly a high and tight fastball, exactly. It's a fairly anticipated question. There's nothing strange or nasty about it. And the only conclusion I can reach is that perhaps Trump would rather us be talking about this than the fact that he was up there disputing healthcare medical experts about the efficacy of this malaria drug, literally trying to play the role of scientist when he's not that. And he acted as if his optimism about this drug had no adverse consequences. In fact, there's serious adverse consequences that could happen here. You could easily foresee a situation in which he gets the hopes up of people who then go and make a run trying to get their hands on this drug, and then people who actually need it have difficulty getting access to it. Those are serious medical consequences to being cavalier about this stuff. And yes, I do think it's worth talking about how he treated Peter's question, which was a totally fair question. But I don't want to lose sight of the fact that what he was doing there is dangerous and ethically dubious, and we shouldn't take our eye off of that very important point.
Yes, of course. And David Jolly, the president says, well, I feel good about this drug. I feel good about it. Governor Cuomo today, talking about treatments, said, well, this is all about science. Donald Trump apparently thinks it's all about his feelings. But you tweeted today that you thought this was a full meltdown by Trump in this press briefing. There's so many things to address in it. The attack on the press, the attack on our colleague, and the stuff that Sam just mentioned. I'll give you as a potpourri. Take your pick about what you want to address first.
Well, look, Peter was actually being generous in the way he approached this question to the president, because the predicate for the entire story is the president of the United States disputes the nation's leading health expert on whether or not there is a therapeutic available to address this pandemic virus. Donald Trump is saying something different than the leading health experts. And Peter was being generous in saying, Mr. President, you have millions of Americans scared and your message is not clear. How would you like to reconcile that? The meltdown, I think, is occurring occurring, John, because Donald Trump knows this has gotten away from him, and he can't spin his way out of this. It is clear. And what I would offer in this moment is where leadership fails us, we have to assume the mantle of leadership ourselves. We do have to practice stay at home. We have to amplify the message of our national health experts. We have to rely on pastors who are saying we're not going to have church services, and schools who are shutting down, and governors who are saying we are closing all essential businesses, because that's what's required in this moment. What Donald Trump is unwilling to tell the American people is that this is going to get much worse, and that the answer to this is not as simple as he wants us to believe it is. And what Donald Trump also won't tell us is that the economic impact is far worse. The $1 trillion bill on Capitol Hill is not going to fix it. The fix is going to be somewhere to the magnitude of $5 trillion. On the health side, what is required is a national lockdown. Leadership in this moment is failing us by not being honest with the American people about that. There are things outside of the reach of Donald Trump that he simply can't control. We understand that as a nation, but we need leadership who is honest, who is disciplined in their message, and who is willing to make the hard decisions on behalf of us, the people they lead, in this moment to protect both our health and also the economy that we will rely on for years to come.
Kimberly, Peter Alexander doesn't need a defense from me. His work speaks for itself. He's unerringly fair in his coverage, but Donald Trump seems at this moment to be triggered by, I mean, clearly his reaction to Peter's question, the fact that he then later in the press briefing came back around and attacked Peter again, suggests that, as David Jolly just suggested, there are other things at work here, that his petulance and his thin-skinnedness and his kind of pathetic displays in this case are being driven by deeper things than the nature of the question. On the face of it, it couldn't just be the question that drove his reaction. What do you make of Trump right now at the end of this week, the week in which many people noted that Donald Trump made a shift? It was a marked shift, the shift from 2 months of what me worry, there's no problem here, it's all going to be fine, to we have a silent, invisible enemy in this virus, and we have to wage war on it, and I am the wartime commander. He made that rhetorical shift this week, but he ended this week with this display. What are we to make of the totality of what we've seen this week and the punctuation mark that this behavior at this press briefing made for the week go?
Look, I'll start by saying that his reaction to Peter was visceral in a lot of ways. We've heard President Trump himself say in interviews since he was on the campaign trail that denigrating the press is a weapon in his arsenal that he uses because it's to his advantage when people stop believing members of the press. Unfortunately, at this point, it is important for the people to have factual, accurate information. And what Peter recited were the statistics at that point about death and infection in this country, numbers that Americans have seen rise exponentially in the last week. And it is something that is causing a lot of fear and concerns. We as journalists are hearing from people too. And not only was it not a high and tight fastball, as Sam said, it was an opportunity that the president missed. What the president could have said is Americans aren't helpless in this, that the federal government, state government, everyone needs Americans' cooperation in order to keep this a pandemic from being worse, in order to flatten the curve, so to say, that the Americans can keep themselves safe, keep their family members safe, and keep their community safe by staying indoors, by listening very carefully to what officials are telling them, and make it a moment where Americans feel invested in getting through this and getting the better of this, and that it will be hard. The harder times are ahead, and it could last a long time. That would have been a great moment for the president to use, and Peter served him a softball for that, and he chose instead to go to his trusty, long-used, approach of attacking the media.
I just want to put up one thing. We're going to take a break in a second, but I want to put a picture up of someone who was in the White House press briefing room today. Can we show this this gentleman, please? Put up the picture of. There he is. That's Sean Spicer. That's the person who the president called on after he attacked Peter Alexander to ask a question. He answered that question respectfully. This is apparently how the president would prefer to have his press corps stocked. He'd prefer to have a former press secretary of his sitting in the audience, asking questions, throwing him softballs that he can answer. That's the reporter, I put quote marks around that. That's the person who sat in the press briefing room today, who Donald Trump treated with respect. That's where we're headed right now. Wartime leadership as defined by Donald Trump. After the break, in a vacuum.